Look out your window, baby. There's a scene you'd like to catch. The band is playing Dixie. A man got his hand outstretched. Could be the Führer, could be the local priest. You know, sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. Welcome to Songs of Experience, a Bob Dylan podcast where we explore the man and the music one song at a time. I'm your host, Henry Bernstein, and I'm very happy to welcome a Midwest legend, Bob Dylan concert addict, 80s Bob defender, and true friend and patron, Matt Simonsen, here to talk about the song from Dylan's 1983 album, Infidels, Man of Peace. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Henry, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to join for the first time on
Oh
the
my
song
God.
experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, you and I have crossed paths many times on Pod Dylan, and you're what we call a ringer in the Bob Pod world. You need a solid, fun, knowledgeable, clever guest. You call Matt Simonson. So, Matt, we first had the pleasure of meeting on a Pod Dylan. I think it was.
Band of the Hand, right?
Yes. Okay. Band of the Hand, which was an 80s deep cut.
Yes.
And right, we watched that movie. We sat through that movie. And then I think you were a little more generous than I was. And and then we got to come back and do Bob-orama with Rob, where we just ran through some random songs, not knowing what the other one was going to talk about. So that was fun.
Yes, that was a blast. Well, that was a great format, really. A lot of surprises, a lot of great songs, deep cuts on that
Deep
one too.
cuts, a lot of deep cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, after all that, you and I actually had the pleasure of spending like significant time together before, after, and during Bob shows in Chicago, Milwaukee, Somerset, Wisconsin.
Somerset, Wisconsin. Yeah.
I will never forget sitting at the bar with you in Milwaukee, just you and your wife chatting it up and then going into that experience and then coming out of it sort of like, what did
Yeah.
we just see?
No, that was great because I remember on our joint session with Rob, you and I both kind of revealed our concert going habits were the same early on. Just go by ourselves,
Mhm.
not talk to anybody or interact. I'm just here to see Bob, and then I go home. And it's so much nicer having friends and acquaintances that you can check up on, see who's going to be there, run into Sykens or run into Michael Glover Smith or Adam or
Right.
catch Ray every once in a while. So that's always a great part of the shows now.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then, we even got to catch each other in Somerset, where I finally got converted to be a Silvio lover when Bob brought back Silvio for the first time in 20 years or something.
Yeah, after it was over, well, actually during Silvio, you texted me and you're just like, this arrangement rocks. It finally connected with you. So
Finally
after
connected.
600 some plays, Bob finally gave it to you. What a great
Yeah.
song.
What a great song. Yeah. So, well, on that note, what is your Bob Dylan origin story, Matt?
All right. Well, like most kids in the 80s, I came about Bob in an indirect way. So looking back, I have memories of Bob without knowing it was Bob. We Are the World. I was 10 years old, I think, when that hit. And watching the documentary that was on Netflix was amazing. But I do remember that part of it and that voice and I liked it. I had no idea who he was. And I just, that was always my favorite part was that one guy. But there's so many voices in We Are the World. And then fast forward a few years, Wilburys came out. My friends and I were huge Tom Petty fans. So this was probably 89-ish. Full Moon Fever was out. Tom Petty was number one. Free Falling was everybody's favorite song. Then the Wilburys came out. So we're like, oh, there's another Tom Petty album with some other guys, some old dudes, and I think there's a Beatle in there. And we'd listen to those tapes. And I remember saying to my friends, I kind of like that one guy that sings the Tweeter song. I don't know who it is, but there's just something about that voice that I kind of like it. It's mysterious, it's attractive in some undefined way. And then the biggest aha moment for me was I remember driving in my car when I was a senior in high school. I was going from the school to some physical therapy and a football injury and I heard like a Rolling Stone on the radio. And this was back in the day. There was no internet. The radio didn't always introduce the song. There was no display on your car that said the artist and the year and the picture of the album. It just came on and it just that rim shot just went through the speakers and it locked me in. And I told people before, it was just like I was in a trance. I just kind of remember song being over and I was there parked at the hospital. Hopefully I drove safely. But I just remember feeling that song and it just reached out to me as a senior in high school, getting ready to go to college. You know, the typical like what am I doing? Is my world coming to an end? Am I leaving home? Direction am I taking? I'm directionless. You know, I can't make it on my own in the real world. All those typical things that an 18, 19-year-old is feeling. And the song just it hit me, it struck me. And then I shut it off. I had to go in. And then for weeks after, I was asking my friends who were hopeless and worthless in this endeavor, have you heard that one song? You know, how does it feel? And they're like, no, I don't know what you're talking about,
Oh
you
my
know.
God.
And, you know, finally I heard it again on the radio and they introduced it, Bob Dylan. So then I diligently went to Columbia House,
Oh yeah. That's
taped
where I
my
got all
penny.
my, yep.
Yeah, I taped my penny to the postcard
Yep.
and I sent in for as many Bob Dylan CDs as I could. I got the greatest hits. He listened to that, wore that out, and then the two others I remember getting early were Freewheeling and Good as I've Been to You.
Mm. Oh my
And I remember
gosh.
one time, the first time I played Good as I've Been to You, I was versed in greatest hits and Freewheeling, and I put Good as I've Been to You on. And I remember, like, I think I went into the bathroom to comb my hair. I went down the hall or
Back
something.
when you had hair, of course.
Back when I had hair,
Yeah.
yes. And then this must have been when I lost it, but I remember like I remember kind of hearing it, and I just kind of like paused, and I'm like, you know, I think it was probably Frankie and Albert that was on, and I'm
hmm
just like, well, what is this? They must have sent me the wrong CD, or there must
hmm
be some kind of defect because this isn't Bob Dylan. You know, and again, no internet, no chronology. I'd not read any of the books.
hmm
I had no idea. And I was just used to every artist sounding exactly the same from album to album to album. You know, and Bruce Springsteen even now pretty much sounds like he did in 1975.
Sure.
You know, but you know, this was so different. Freewheeling to Good as I've Been to You. And I was just kind of like well that's interesting. And you know, I didn't like it as well, but took a little while. And you know, by the time I got to Froggy Went a Courtin', I was hooked. Then at that point, it was whenever Columbia House would have a new album, or I would go to Music Land, Sam Goody,
hmm
and it was just random. I mean, there's no Spotify. It was less efficient, but it was exciting because you had the
Yes.
anticipation. I'm gonna go. I have no idea what this man has done. I know nothing about him. And oh, here's something called Street Legal. And here's something called Down in the Groove. Which one should I get? Because I've only got, you know, 12.95. I can only buy.
hmm
And then the next time you go, there might be Slow Train Coming. And then there's Greatest Hits 2. And there's some interesting songs on there. I kind of like this song. I'll go check that album out from Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. You just tried to fill it in, and
Yes.
I think until I read Clinton
Howard Stones.
Hayman's
Oh.
book, Behind the Shades,
hmm
was finally when I got a chronology
Yeah.
because this was still 93, 94-ish before Expecting Rain, I think, started up in like 95.
Oh wow. So
Before
so Good as I've Been to You was new when you when
it,
that was like the new CD they sent with the other ones.
Yeah, it was 92. So I think
Wow.
the newest one was World Gone Wrong.
hmm hmm
And then so yeah, after kind of figuring out who Bob Dylan was,
hmm
you know, trying to collect whatever I could, the next memory I have of him was really I was in the weight room in high school and I heard the radio, new Bob Dylan single coming out, and it was Dignity, you
Mm.
know, and I was just like,
Oh.
whoa, what is this? You know, and it went on forever, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
just that hypnotic, you're
hmm
lost in time. And you know, you're trying to, okay, he's got Prince Albert and he's a fat man, he's got bald guy, there's the winds and you know, Chicago, all this stuff going on in Dignity. And then it was like, okay, where am I gonna find this? I think Greatest Hits 3 came out right about then.
Mm.
And then shortly thereafter, I think the next year, then the
MTV.
MTV Unplugged
Yeah.
came out. And by then, like the internet was forming, developing. There was Rec Music Dylan, which was the first newsletter.
Mm.
And I just took to that like a moth to a flame. And obviously, like Bob Lank's Bill Pagel's site, Expecting Rain, every day. I mean, I'm a creature of habit. Every
Oh
day since
yeah.
1995, I fire up the computer, I go to Expecting Rain,
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
see what's going on. And And then slowly, just like a sponge, I was young and I had no responsibilities. So I could really just dive into as much Bob Dylan stuff as I could find. Eventually, ran into Olaf's Chronicles and got the chronology and then just started filling in gaps and then became an addict of live recordings. And I started trading tapes and reading all the biographies. And I'm still at it. I'm still trying to download the latest concerts and, read as many Bob Dylan books as I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
So I've never stopped.
It's amazing. I can't believe maybe we have talked about that one time, but I had a very similar experience too. I just the summer of 2001, I was going into my sophomore year of college, and I my brother and my friend Josh gave me Freewheelin', Bring It All Back Home, and Time Out of Mind, and I just that was it for me. And then I got a Columbia House
Yeah,
subscription, and I would just, yeah, whatever CDs they had available, get them.
yeah,
And I was not aware of like the controversy of Dylan going electric or converting to Christianity
yeah,
or like it was just all, and so much so that I bought Live in Budokan because it was a double live album that was available for, the two
double
cents.
yeah, right. Even
So I
better.
was like, great, okay. And like, so,
Yeah.
you know, one of like some of those songs, like the first versions I heard of them were the Budokan versions. Like I think I'd
Mm.
heard Freewheelin', so it wasn't like Don't Think Twice as a reggae song was my first introduction. Like I think
Yeah.
Ray has talked about that, Ray Paget. But some of those I was like, this is the song. And so yeah, it was just complete get as much as I can. And then once I read Howard Soane's and then other books filling in the chronology, like you said. So I have a very similar story. I can definitely relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it would make an interesting book or panel or something taking people of different generations because it really
Hmm.
is. I would say you and I are kind of in that same generation. You might be a little closer to millennial. I might be a little closer to Gen X, depending
Yeah.
on however you divide it. Like the people that experienced Bob when they were 15 years old in 1964 and they went through the whole journey with him. That's very different because they did feel all of that in the
Hmm.
time. Like when Bob went country, they had no knowledge that he was going to write Blood on the Tracks. When he
Right. Right.
went Christian, they had no knowledge that he was going to do whatever he was doing in the 80s or eventually write Oh
Right.
Mercy. Just like people who came of age during the Sinatra album. They
Hmm.
probably thought like, oh my God, is he going to be doing this forever? But yeah, I've told people before, like I didn't realize I was supposed to hate self-portrait, and I
Right.
love it.
Right. I
I love it,
know.
and
Right.
we have the advantage because we would listen to an album. Let's say you listen to New Morning and it,
Hmm.
it wasn't your favorite. You could easily go and listen to Bringing It All Back Home, or you could
Hmm.
listen to Infidels,
Hmm.
listen to whatever else was out there. And people that are becoming Bob Dylan fans today because of the movie, they'll go to Spotify and they'll just be bewildered as well because there's so much of it. There's a lot of variability there for them, but they've got infinite options.
Right. Right.
And I think the one thing that makes me appreciate and relate to the older generation that went through it in real time with Bob is that period between Tempest and Rough and Rowdy Ways, where it was what, 8 years
Hmm.
between new albums. That's a long time in
Felt like
real.
longer.
It did, but
Yeah.
the people that were deep in the 60s and then they waited for, Blood on the Tracks, basically, that was a long period of time for them. And before it got to other things that they were used to, they went through these different periods.
Right. Right.
In real time, it's a little slower, and you don't know what Bob's going to do. We
Right.
still don't know what he's going to do, but
Right. At least he's touring right now. So like and I think in the 90s for folks becoming fans in the 90s and 2000s, there was always a period of him. There's always been a period of him touring. So,
yeah.
the waiting is a little less
Hmm.
harder. I want to say one more thing about that in terms of like multiple generations before we get into Man of Peace. For year, I have two little kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year old. And like they know dad loves Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Like they're and the thing that we listen to the most is Taylor Swift together. And I'm always trying to get them to listen to Bob Dylan in like I was like two. I was overthinking it too much. Like I would play Good As I've Been to You, and I'm like, there's a really fun kid song about a silly frog on here. Listen to this.
Yeah.
And like, turn this off, Dad, whatever. And after seeing A Complete Unknown, I've been revisiting that
Mhm.
period of time more after probably a decade of only listening to live Dylan recordings from 1992 to 2024. Like that's what
Yeah.
I've been mostly listening to. But I'm thankful, I'm grateful to this movie for reopening my love for that whole period of time, 61 to 65. And by God, I started playing Freewheelin' and Highway
Mhm.
61 for them, and they were into it. And I was like, "Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That is how you bring people into Bob Dylan. You play the stuff that you're supposed to play first and then
Yeah.
keep going. Like you heard Like
Yeah.
a Rolling Stone on the radio. For how
Yeah.
many people every decade since Bob has been around where I'm sure they had that moment of hearing Like a Rolling Stone on the radio for the first time and it
Yeah.
changed their life. That's probably not an unfamiliar story. And so now my kids know. No, they know, they get excited when Highway 61 comes on because it has that silly whistle,
Oh, yeah.
and they love the sun's not yellow, it's chicken, and in
Yeah.
Tombstone Blues. And so like, I'm not quite giving them Good As I've Been to You yet, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I know the proper way to onboard them.
Yeah, that's the other thing about the multiple generations. In many ways, Bob's the first artist who matured as an artist throughout his life and remained a relevant artist.
Say more
Um,
on that.
well, I took a similar path. When I was in my 20s, I predominantly listened to the music Bob produced in his 20s because that was what I related to the most.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's just that where I was in life. Like
Hmm.
I'm scared, I'm defiant, I'm arrogant as hell. The world's out there, the world's all screwed up. I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna try, that kind of, brat punk kind of attitude resonates more with a 20-year-old Matt than, the 49-year-old Matt.
Hmm.
And what I listen to now mostly are the albums where Bob is in a similar age to me, where
Hmm.
he's not past his prime, but he's no longer young and there's an infinite future lying ahead. There's a little bit of reflection,
More
there's
wisdom, maybe.
a little more wisdom. There's that acknowledgement of age and time and love
Death.
lost and death and all those
Yeah.
types of things. Would I have appreciated Rough and Rowdy Ways as much as a 22-year-old as I did as a 46-year-old or 45-year-old? Probably not,
Hmm.
just because I'm a different person.
Hmm.
But I do vividly remember hearing Bob Dylan's Dream when I was in college and just hearing it and feeling it and $10,000 at the drop of a hat. I'd give
Hmm.
it all gladly if our lives could be like that. Missing my friends, missing the past and thinking like, oh, like not that life is over, but life has passed me by and like looking back at that small chunk and I see it differently now that I'm older than I did when I was 20, but you're supposed to,
Hmm.
and you've captured Bob's thoughts when he was that age.
Hmm.
And he was more precocious at his age than the rest of us were. But still, he's a lot wiser now, or when he was 43 years old, like you are when he recorded Infidels. He was wise beyond his years, and he's a lot closer to what I'm thinking about nowadays than when I was 20. So everybody gets that evolution for the Gen Z, Gen A coming in right now,
Hmm.
seeing A Complete Unknown. It's a great entry
Yeah.
place. I mean, those are
Yeah.
fantastic songs, but it's
Yeah.
also more relevant to their life and what their thoughts are today than what you and I are thinking about every day. You and I aren't going
Yeah.
to drop it all and go to the coffee shop and have a go at being that artist we've always really secretly wanted to
Right.
be. But your kids are. They can
Right.
do that. My kids can do that. And all the
Right.
people listening to Taylor Swift and Sabrina Carpenter, um, you know, they still have that hope, that optimism, that unlimited potential in their future that comes with their age. And that's a
Hmm.
wonderful thing.
It's
Uh,
funny because you mentioned Taylor Swift, and of course, I famously or infamously, I don't know, I've become a Swiftie in my older age, as I've
Yeah.
aged, I get more and more obsessed with her. So you never know. But, speaking of that period of time in 1983 when this song was recorded, this album, Infidels, was recorded between April and May of 1983, released October 27th, 1983, and was recorded at the Power Station in New York City. The people who played on this album, produced, of course, by Bob Dylan and Mark Knopfler.
Hmm.
Bob Dylan on guitar, harmonica, keyboards, vocals, production. Alan Clark on keyboards. Sly Dunbar on drums and percussion. Clyde King, vocals on Union Sundown. Mark Knopfler, guitar and production. Robbie Shakespeare, bass. Mick Taylor
Yeah.
on guitar from the Rolling Stones. And Ben Montench on keyboards, a classic Bob Dylan session guy. I mean,
Yeah.
banger band, banger producer, and for whatever reason, for me personally, Infidels, I always will wonder what the Mark Knopfler version would have sounded like. And I think we get a
Yeah.
taste of that with Springtime in New York and with Bootleg 1 through 3, with Blind Willie McTell stuff. But it peaked at number 20 on the Billboard 200. So not bad. I mean, as an album. I mean, and every song on it is powerful in one way or another. What is your relationship to Infidels as a whole, Matt?
Yeah, it's easily become my favorite album. And
Wow.
I think to be objective, I think Highway 61 is the greatest album of all time. By
Period.
Bob or
The
by
end.
anybody else.
Yes.
And like a Rolling Stone's my favorite song. So a lot of people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, you're the guy that likes all the weird songs." Well, I like all the other songs too.
Yeah, let's be
Um,
clear. Matt is an
yeah,
80s Bob defender, but his favorite song is like a Rolling Stone.
yes.
So,
I mean, I love Mr. Tambourine Man. I
yeah.
love Blind Willie McTell. I love Visions of Johanna. But I like to come on and talk about the forgotten children. I
Mhm.
mean, nobody's knocking down your door saying, we really should talk about Man of Peace or
No,
Union
in fact,
Sound
Pod
and
Dylan
Band of
never even covered it.
Yeah, which is a shame. But so I really like this song. And again, I think the milestones of life, turning 40 is a big, and I think that's the traditional, old age, right? Is
Mhm.
bring out the rocking chair, the black balloons at the
Right.
party, you're
Over
over
the
the hill.
hill. Yeah.
Which I mean, for in today's world, it's really not 40. It's
Right.
almost 70 really is now when people start to think of themselves as getting older. But when we were growing up, I remember my dad having a 40th birthday party, and it was the black balloons and over the
Mhm.
hill, and and I thought he was old as dirt, because he was 40 and I was I was 10 or whatever it
Yeah.
was. So but as a person turns the milestone ages 20, 30, 40, you do start to reflect on things. And I went through a very similar process there and had a divorce, got remarried, job change. This was rough around the time of like the great financial crisis, 2007, 2008, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of turmoil.
Mm.
And this album really like addresses turmoil, embraces turmoil,
Mhm.
grapples with turmoil.
Mhm.
Turmoil's just bubbling beneath the surface
Yeah, I
on
would
every
say both
song of
like
this
in
album.
personally for Bob and reflecting on the
Spiritually
world. Yeah.
and on the world.
Yeah.
To me, this is multifaceted. It does really show the portrait of an artist from a personal perspective, his relationship with himself, his women, or his personal close relationships, with his craft, profession, with the world, with his country. It's there's so many layers to this thing
Hmm.
that it's easy for me to jump in. I've got kind of the analytical mind. I like to dissect things. I like to break things down, understand. And this is like a puzzle. You can just jump in with both feet into Infidels. Joker Man's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
Probably my second favorite song, and it's probably behind Like a Rolling Stone. It's untouchable nobody else could come close to something like Joker Man.
Hmm.
And and that opens the album. It was on, I think it was on the greatest hits. But I remember buying Infidels And I thought, oh, this is a cool album cover. And the first, you hear
I
Joker
think
Man
it's on Greatest Hits Volume 3, which is like
3. I think it is.
insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Tangled Up in Blue, Joker Man, and Dignity are on the same Greatest Hits album. Like this man needs to make a Greatest Hits Volume 4 and 5. Like
He
it's
does.
it's
He
so
does.
weird.
Yeah. So I was personally receptive to it,
Hmm.
right? It's like my own antennae were set to receive the wavelengths of Infidels, just like in 93 when I was set to hear like a Rolling Stone
Hmm.
and have it connect. I connected with Infidels at the same time and in the same way. And I listened to it more than any other album.
Hmm.
I really like the songs. My personal belief, my hot take, if you will, is that it's the most misunderstood album that Bob has.
Hmm.
I think his attempts with Infidels were more grandiose than any other album he's ever attempted. I don't think he succeeded by the definitions he would have probably set out to define for success.
Right.
And I think, there's no success like failure. Failure's no success at all. By
Right.
by pursuing that vision, he created so many interesting songs, insights, lines, phrases, feelings, emotions in that album that even though it didn't really click with, I think, what he set out to achieve, the remnants of it that we have to sort through are just fascinating and amazing. And you mentioned Bootleg Series Volume 1 through 3. The fact that there's like 5 songs on that from this session, two of which, I think are two of his top 10 songs, Blind Willie McTell and Foot
And
of
for the
Pride,
Pride, yeah.
didn't make the album.
Right.
Um,
Knopfler wanted them to, but he left
he
for his
did.
tour.
He did. So yeah, and like you mentioned, the musicians, the story behind it, the whole springtime in New York, Dire Straits were huge at the time in the 80s.
Huge. Yeah, I mean, he let, like I said,
Yeah,
they were about to go do a Europe tour, I think in Germany
yeah,
or something, and he
yeah.
had to go.
Yeah. Well,
Knopfler had
Money
to
for
go.
Nothing was the hottest song when
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember life before cable TV and MTV. And I remember seeing the I Want My MTV ads and asking my sister, "What is that?" She's like, "Oh, it's kind of like Friday night videos where, you used to have to stay up Friday night until 11,
Hmm.
whatever. It
Hmm.
seemed like it was super late in the night. And then watch videos because that was the only time you could. But when that came out, Money for Nothing with the cartoon and the 3D animation and the
Hmm.
story, and Sting was singing background. I mean, that was bigger
Yeah.
than anything
Oh
going on.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge. It's sort of like Bob's. I don't want to say failures because this album is brilliant, but the areas in which there is a shortcoming, I think in those albums where that happened for Bob Dylan, it led to something greater. Like if 2001 Jack Frost produced Bob Dylan, if that version of Bob Dylan could have a chance at Infidels, production wise, this would be a perfect album. But he didn't have those
Hmm.
skills maybe yet. And
Yeah.
so it's almost like you can't fault him, even though there is a bit of head scratching going on. Like you left Blind Willie McTell and Foot of Pride off of this, huh?
Hmm. Yeah.
It's also you can't fault him for that. Like for whatever reason, he had some sort of vision that didn't quite work perfectly, but Joker Man in many ways it forgives everything, and then all
Oh,
the
yeah.
and
Yeah.
everything else on the album is sort of bonus. So why we could have talked about Joker Man, Matt. Like you could have picked
Yeah.
anything. Why Man of Peace?
Well, just like you mentioned, nobody's talking about Man of Peace.
Okay.
I did Union Sundown with Rob a
Okay.
while back because nobody was talking about Union Sundown.
That's
And
true. Yes.
Rob told me he goes like, yeah, everybody asked for Joker Man, and
Yeah.
I think he even did Joker Man a couple times, and
Yeah.
and honestly, my take on Joker Man's probably very similar to everybody else's, but I love this album so much that I really want people to revisit some of these other songs. Blind Willie McTell, great song, right? Everybody knows it's a great song. People don't need me to come on and talk about Blind Willie McTell or Joker Man, Series of Dreams or
Mhm.
Foot of Pride or Dignity or these songs. Everybody loves those songs, but there's so many good songs in the 80s. so many good songs on these other albums that just because they're competing with all-time Bob Dylan classics, nobody talks about. And
Okay.
so my little niche, my little contribution to the canon is just to get these back up. If somebody who's listening says, you know what, just to appease this guy, I'll put it on again. It's like, oh yeah, it's a little bit better than I remember. That's a win, you know. And I
Mhm.
know Bob Dylan's listening, so when he comes out and the Outlaw Tour and he starts with Man of Peace, you know, we can thank you, you know, for that contribution there.
This song is actually a complete monster. It's over 6 minutes. It's
Yeah.
not a quick little 80s bop
No, it's not a
or
throwaway at all. No.
it is a commitment. And in fact, so much so that actually we'll talk about the live versions of this in a little bit because I want to get into some of the lyrics, but it's shorter when he plays it live. Like this is a you are settled into this album, you are going to listen to Man of Peace
Mhm.
and and you're going to like it. So I'm wondering, you know, in terms of the lyrics, so I read those at the top. He brings in the Führer right away. So
Yeah.
we know that we're talking about Satan and this idea that Satan can be in disguise. The first thing I thought of was Sympathy for the Devil by the Stones, and I wondered if there is any kind of mirroring there of like is Bob portraying Satan from Satan's perspective? Is there any sympathy here, or is Bob educating us on what to look for?
Yeah, well, my opinion is there's not a lot of sympathy here. And I think getting back to Infidels as an album,
Hmm.
and you know, so I think acknowledging that it failed to live up to what Bob was aiming for, its potential, it fell short. I think that's fair to say. And
Hmm.
I think the reason people don't herald the album alongside of Blood on the Tracks, Blonde on Blonde, Highway 61 is on the surface, it does not seem to have that consistency, that unity of message. People will say it kind of seems all over the place. Like, here's a mystical song like Joker Man. And then there's this nice love song, Don't Fall Apart on Me Tonight. And then you've got this rant about the unions, and then there's Satan here, and then there's some weird song about an old woman and going to the moon and all this kind of stuff. And people, it just seems all over the place.
Thematically, it seems all over the place, you're
It
saying.
does,
Hmm.
and that is where people who are sick in the head like me that want to just dive in and figure out, okay, how does this all connect? Because I don't think that Bob is kind of a slapdash. I'm just going to randomly do something. I think at that point in his career, he didn't go into a studio without a vision.
Hmm.
We've benefited a little from some of these bootleg series, some of these books that have been given access to the recording logs, and witnessed him going in with very big specific songs.
Hmm.
So go back to Blonde on Blonde, November 1965. What is it that starts that session? It's She's Your Lover Now and Visions of Johanna. Visions of Johanna makes it. She's Your Lover Now doesn't. Now, that's one of my favorite songs
Yeah, me
as well.
too.
And I could talk about that song forever.
I'll bring
But
you
that's
back.
but that song is like Infidels, where he came in with something big, something that he knew was there, but he couldn't wrangle it. He couldn't
Hmm.
get his hands around it. And he eventually kind of had to shape shift it, let it go. He finally played it on the keyboard to get it out of his system.
Hmm.
And then he has that heavy
Hmm.
and it's done. And he did something similar with Infidels. He comes in with Blind Willie McTell. He comes in with Jokerman. He comes in with Foot of Pride or Too Late. Like
Oh,
big,
too late. Yeah.
meaty songs. And what is brilliant to me, what I really connect with is for a person of that age in the 40s, you're no longer a kid. You're a working person. You have money, which means you don't have as much money as you need or you want, but you have enough. that you understand how it's earned and spent.
Hmm.
You understand economics, you understand investing, you understand business consequences, whether you're an employer, an employee, you're a voter, you understand politics. You're no longer a spring chicken. You've probably lost your grandparents. You understand death. You have some spirituality, some religion. You've had relationships that have failed. You've had relationships that have made it. You may or may not have kids, but you understand that position. So there's all of these different lenses and dynamic dimensions that exist when you are that age, kind of for the first time. And what he set out to do at the kernel of it is Bob Dylan still is seeking the truth. That's the one consistent current that's followed him throughout his whole life is he has always sought the truth. He started out looking for the truth in folk music and looking through the Greenwich Village scene. And then he looked for it in rock and roll. And then he looked for it in the country family setting. He looked for it in mysticism and astrology and the street legal times. He looked for it in Christianity. He's always looked for it in his Jewish roots. And where we find him now in this unique period is he's not over his Christianity period,
No,
but
no.
he's looking at it differently than he was in 1978, 1979. There's that tinge of disappointment. When he goes into that Christian period, the end of times are tomorrow or
Hmm.
tonight. I mean, it's imminent.
Yeah.
And where he is in Infidels is, oh, it's not imminent, which means I got to deal with all my and I've got kids, I'm divorced, what's
Hmm.
going on in this country? The
Hmm.
Reagan Revolution is
Right.
going on. There's political change and turmoil that creates tension in the air. There's the struggles with the Middle East. There's the Iranian hostages, all kinds of different things going on economically. Computers are new, the IT revolution is taking hold. So you start to see this intertextuality on infidels that's just amazing. Once you start looking at it, you open your eyes to the totality of infidels, and
Hmm.
it really starts to blow you away. And you shift from saying, like, Bob's all over the place to Bob's trying to make connections. Bob is smart enough in his 40s to realize, and he was smart enough in his 20s, but not everybody is, that there's no single answer to everything. There's no one single thing that moves the needle. Life is messy. Life is an aggregation of all the factors, the
Hmm.
economic, the romantic, the familial, the political, the spiritual. All of those things combine and they enforce or they contradict or they clash or they move in synchronicity together to form what we call life. And
Hmm.
it's very confusing for a lot of people, for
Hmm.
everybody. And Bob is not an exception, but the difference between you, me, everybody, and Bob Dylan is Bob Dylan says, well, I'm going to set out to explain this all in 10 songs and bring this all together. And that's what I think the story of Infidels is
Hmm.
Bob Dylan at his most mature state at the time, trying to describe the truth as he sees it, as the world existed, according to him, in the early 80s, which is an interesting time for me personally,
Hmm.
because I was, 8 to 10 years old at that time. I lived through that. The first president I remember was Ronald Reagan.
Hmm.
I remember some of these things personally. And I kind of revisited the Infidels album when I got to the same age that Bob was. So I see these songs in that lens of him trying to describe truth as he sees it. And it's incredible to me. And I think it's very relevant. I think one of the things that we'll talk about if we ever get to the song is that the topics in Infidels, the topics in Man of Peace, you can look in I was going to say the newspaper to show my age, but you can look online or on your phone or on X or Blue Sky or whatever, and you can see similarities in the news today to
Hmm.
what's going on in some of these songs because
Oh,
they are
absolutely.
they are eternal to the nature of humans. And
Right.
that's
It's not just that
what's
times
so
they are a
special.
change in is eternal. Like this man of peace
This
is eternal.
this is eternal.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned the Führer. I mean, he comes right out of the gate,
Yeah.
with one of the most controversial characters in all of history. The thing about the man of peace. So the phrase man of peace, the chorus, sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. So obviously rooted in the Bible. And
Hmm.
basically, the premise is that the devil is not this horrendous, horrific, ugly boogeyman, monster, bad guy that's so obvious to spot. But the devil is beguiling.
Mm.
He will come and he will appear beautiful. A lot of texts will describe that he's charming, he's salacious. He
He's got
is
a sweet gift of gab. He's got a harmonious tongue. He knows every song of love that has ever been sung. Good
exactly,
intentions can be evil. Both hands can be full of grease. Sometimes
yes.
Satan comes as a man of peace. Yeah, he's slick,
He is slick and
charming.
whole man of peace. So, instantly everybody has something they think of about Adolf Hitler. But one thing people don't remember is that I believe he was the Time Man of the Year back in the early 30s, and at one point in time was credited with being somewhat of a savior for Germany. He was seen in a positive light. I won't say man of peace, but in something similar. It's a characterization that has been used. It obviously has biblical roots,
Hmm.
specifically about Satan, but people, humans, have used it at times as a warning, like, hey, watch out for this guy. This
Hmm.
guy's coming and
Hmm.
he's promising all these things, the land of milk and honey, but be careful because this guy is a snake. There's something about him that we don't trust. It's an archetype that's existed for 2000 years at least. And again, it's still relevant still to this day.
Yeah.
And that we're on the first stanza of Man of Peace, right? And
Right.
so, again, when I think Bob Dylan set out to describe the truth in Infidels, I see it as kind of an everlasting truth that's tied to the nature of humanity and humanity's turmoil and struggles with,
Hmm.
getting by and making a civilization, grappling with death, relationships, all those kinds of things.
Right. I mean, he is doing that sort of other side of the mirror dichotomy thing. Like he says, Führer, local priest, and then in the
Mhm.
in the next verse, intentions can be evil, both hands can be full of grease. Like he's playing with all the different sort of sayings and tropes
Well,
and
nobody's safe, right? I mean,
right, right.
he's willing to call it like he sees it. I
Yeah.
mean, he's not like he said when he was talking about things have changed. He's like, it's not a song that pussyfoots around. I mean, he just comes out and
Hmm.
he's like, hey, could be the local priest, could be the chief of police, it could be
Hmm.
the person standing next to you, the one
Hmm.
that you notice least. He's really basically saying like this is a very real thing. Satan is real. The story, the book of Revelations, he's come out and said, I'm a literal believer in it. I don't know if he still is, but at the time, I think he very much was.
When did he say that?
It's in the 84 interview with
Hmm.
Kurt Loder and Rolling Stone.
Hmm. Hmm.
So and I think he was all in on it, and I think he sees signs of it,
Hmm.
and the interesting thing about religious texts is they're vague enough and there's wiggle room in a lot of them that you can interpret some things, you can pick up patterns and signals and signs that go back to support your narrative if you seek it. And then people do seek it. And he's no exception there as a human. He's seeing all kinds of signs. There's that famous sermon he gave stage where he talks about the Bible saying there's this great nation whose symbol is a bear and they're going to attack the Middle East. And then later the Soviets invade Afghanistan. He's like, I told you, everything's lining up. And like I said before, you have your antennae set for certain signals. And there's so many signals in the world that you kind of pick up what you're tuned in to receive. And
Right.
he was definitely looking for all those things at this time. And he was getting them pretty strongly.
He continues, well, he's in the background, then he's in the front. Both eyes are looking like they're on a rabbit hunt. Nobody can see through him, not even the chief of police. So he goes from this good intentions is evil, both hands are full of grease. I think that means like greasing the palms, right? Like bribery. Is that what he's referring to?
I would say so, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
yeah, again, talking about politician you usually associate with the politician,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah. But then he goes first in the background, then in the front.
Hmm.
This guy, this man of peace is sort of all
Shifty.
over, yes,
Yeah.
shifty all
Yeah.
over the place, except for the fact though that both this person knows what they're doing. Both eyes are like on a rabbit hunt. I assume
Mhm.
on a rabbit hunt you have to be paying attention.
Yeah.
And so this man of peace, even though he's shifty and slippery and sort of in all the different places, he's laser focused, kind of like Bob Dylan in the studio.
Yeah. Diabolical,
And
right? I mean,
diabolical, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's just single-minded of focus, intent, knows what they're doing, but they're kind of soft playing it on the surface. Yeah,
Hmm.
just not the kind of person that you would really want to hang around with. Not
Hmm.
someone you'd hang around with much, right? From Wood of Pride.
Yeah, I like it. He's also like nobody can see through him. Like you can't see who the real person is. Like you can't turn your
He's got
X-ray
that
vision.
veneer. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
but not even the chief of police, as if like the chief of police is a great, source of wisdom.
Yeah. But but
But it rhymes and it sounds good. So
but again, I mean, if you look at when you're a child, there are certain jobs or positions that you revere, look up to, people you associate with kind of being in control of the world, right? Your parents, the police, like your minister, your pastor, your rabbi,
right.
and you and I have grown up in a time where we've seen, you know, a little tarnish on the reputation of those institutions a
Yeah,
little.
the chief of police to me from when I grew up was Chief Wiggum. So on
Yeah.
Simpsons. That's the when I hear chief of police, that's who I think of. So
But chief of police, you could go back to Daryl Gates, right? Who was the LA chief of police during the Rodney King riots, or
of
you could
course,
go
yeah.
back to, some of the George Floyd riots that we
Hmm.
had, where the police, the defund the police moment, obviously with the Catholic priest scandal, Sinead O'Connor,
Hmm.
these are not institutions or positions that get 100% benefit of the doubt in today's age,
Well,
where
do you think that
before they
when
might
Bob
have.
is saying even the chief of police, he's referring to even the most altruistic, greatest minds who can see good and evil can't see through this one. But do you think he's also saying that even the chief of police could be a man of peace? Like, is he including the chief of police in this stanza as that type of person who could be Satan or man of peace?
Yeah, I think it could be either way. I think it could be that those people are manipulative, or they are posing in those positions, or I think he's also addressing that they can't protect you. So I do think he's talking
Mm,
to the listener,
so
and
cynical. Yeah.
either saying like, hey, like the chief of police isn't going to help you in fighting this guy, the devil. I
Hmm.
mean, Satan's overpowering, and he's not going to come at you with brute force and ugliness, but he's going to be charming and beguiling, and
Hmm.
just come up right next to you, and you won't even notice. And in other descriptions, it's like in a wanted way, like someone that's that great. You see these movies, right, where like a guy will go to the bar, and then there's like a prostitute or something that comes up to him, and he doesn't realize she's a prostitute.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
he just thinks like, wow, this is, my lucky day. I've got this hot woman hitting on me. And, it's something similar there. Like you don't see it coming. Like,
Mm.
you're a good person. Like you're out of your world and element here. And you're just
Yeah.
dealing with a professional that knows how to manipulate people and push the buttons. And you're just you know, you're just a fish.
Yeah,
You're
and I
gonna,
think that sort of catching you when you're not expecting it. It even
yeah,
comes in the next
yeah,
stanza. Well, he'll catch you when you're hoping for a glimpse of the sun, catch you when your troubles feel like they weigh a ton. He could be
yeah.
standing next to you, the person that you'd notice least. I hear that sometimes Satan comes as a man
Yeah.
of peace. He changes the phrasing a little bit,
Yeah.
but that idea that Satan will arrive as
When you're most
when,
vulnerable.
yeah, when you're at your lowest and you're also and
Mhm.
you're also hopeful. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna get it.
You're susceptible.
You're
Yeah, exactly.
susceptible, yeah, and it happens both when you're hopeful for that glimpse of sun and when you're also
Mhm.
like your troubles are weighing you down.
This is the personification of evil, right? Is
Yeah.
you are taking advantage of the most vulnerable people in the
Hmm.
worst way by
Hmm.
pretending to be their friend, pretending to help them when they're most at risk, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's just the worst thing that you can do, taking advantage of somebody. And this is
Yeah.
what it's portraying.
And that person could be standing next to you, right? Like your friend even could
You have
be.
no idea. It could be
Yeah.
anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so sad.
Yeah. It's not obvious. I mean, that
Yeah.
this is the undercurrent of here is like it's not going to come and hit you over the head with a 2x4. It's going to sneak up on you. And
Yeah.
you need to pay attention to it. Is kind of what he's getting at.
It's sort of I guess it's a warning. I mean, it's funny, like, when when we're reading the lyrics and we're presenting this in the context of both the decade at which it was happening and the age that Bob was, I understand it in that context. So it's so interesting to me that this song has only been performed a meager 41 times. First
Hmm.
in Verona, Italy on May 28th, 1984, so a year after, which would make sense that he'd play it supporting the
Yeah.
album. And then the last time, September 19th, 2000 in Newcastle in England. If you were seeing Bob Dylan in the 80s with Tom Petty or with the Grateful
Yeah.
Dead, you might have caught A Man of Peace live. It was played a bunch in 84 and 87, in 90 quite a bit. And I was listening to some of the recordings as one does, and the ones that really stood out were with the Grateful Dead in 1987, like, and it's on their Bob
Hmm.
compilation, Postcards of the Hanging. This is a Grateful Dead song. You know how some Bob Dylan
Yeah.
songs are just like perfect for the
Yeah.
Grateful Dead?
Yeah.
And there's this point in the song where Jerry just rips right into his very long solo of art, and you're like, oh, yes, that's what this song needs. It needs the Grateful Dead. But then I was listening to it at Toad's Place in the
Hmm.
90s, and then again on 2000 in Newcastle, England. Those are the Larry Campbell, Charlie Sexton three-part harmony days, and they
Yeah.
sounded great with this. So this song is a great live song.
Yeah.
And I wonder, Matt, two things. One, why it didn't become one of his great live ones, or even just a mid deep cut live one, in the hundreds or in the 70s or 80s. And also, lastly, have you ever heard a Man of Peace live?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I have not heard
Okay,
it live.
yet.
Yet, but because listening right now, and because I know that whenever people ask nicely, he always acquiesces, and so he'll
Wait,
play.
wait, Matt. That's crazy you said that because in on one of those recordings in 84, I was
Oh
listening to
yes,
it. You know what I'm talking about? He
yeah,
says,
yeah,
"You guys want to hear Man of Peace
or lay
or
lady
Lay
lay.
Lady Lay?" And there's you
Huh?
can't
What's
you,
that? What's it? Okay, okay, man, a piece it is. Yeah,
you can't hear the crowd, but it sounds like they're probably saying "Lay Lady Lay." And he's like, "Nope, we're
nope, we're going. Yeah, there. That was
so
kind of a
amazing right
false
now that
choice. Yeah.
it's so amazing right now that you knew exactly what I was talking about."
Who wants to hear Man of Peace? Who wants to hear Lay Lady Lay? Who wants to hear Man of Peace? Man of Peace. More people want to hear Man of Peace.
And those two songs, again, getting back to the variety, like Lay Lady Lay, Man of Peace. I mean, you couldn't find two more opposite songs in the canon.
I
And those are
know.
the choices you get.
Those are
So
choices you get. And you don't really get the choices. He was going to play Man of Peace.
he was gonna play Man of Peace. Yeah.
But it's a really great live song. Like it's
It
just
is.
a repetitive rocker with some
Mhm.
blues riffs and that has that it's one of those Bob Dylan songs where it's like there's no chorus, but there's the refrain, the final line, like Tangled
Yeah.
Up in Blue, right?
Yep.
And so it's not easy to sing along, but when you get to that last line, you can jump in. The times they are a changing kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
the chorus is the same and it's catchy. And so I think like Highway 61, like Maggie's Farm, everything is broken. He's got some staple rockers that
uh-huh.
he's come back to
Yeah.
time and time again. And this one's got a great beat, right? The sound of this one is fantastic.
Yes.
Like you mentioned, it's 6 minutes long. This is one of those Bob Dylan songs where you start it and you're into it, and then like there's this period in the middle where time just stops, and
Mhm.
then you just experience it all, and then it ends. And a lot of time has gone by, but you just didn't feel it anymore. Like you were so immersed in it. And it's got a good rock and beat, Sly Dunbar, some great fills on the album version, some transitional fills that are just really pleasant to listen to. Yeah, and I think when I was looking at this one, I think there's four different solos
Hmm.
uh song. So Knopfler takes one, and Knopfler didn't use a pick, so he always had a little bit of a muted
Oh.
sound to some of his solos. And obviously Mick Taylor's got more of the slide
Hmm.
traditional rock, and then Bob takes a harmonica solo.
Right.
But I think coming out in the Real Live album that came out, that had both Maggie's Farm, Highway 61, and they're not my favorite versions. They're just kind of generic
Yeah.
rock, blues, like just gonna play a fast one kind of
Right.
vibe to it.
Right.
And this kind of fits in there, but the lyrics are so interesting that I think, is natural to fill that kind of role in a concert in '84 when it came out was this one's up tempo and we're gonna play this one. I think with the Grateful Dead, I think it was probably one of those where they were going back through his catalog and saying like, why aren't you playing some of these gems? Chimes of Freedom, Frankie Lee and Judas Priest,
Hmm.
Queen Jane approximately,
Oh, Bobby
Man of
Weir
Peace.
loved Queen Jane. Yeah. Yeah. Still
Yeah, and
does.
Man
Yeah.
of Peace,
Yeah.
Friend of the Devil. I mean, it's kind of in the same
Oh, I could see Jerry
wheel.
picking up
Yeah,
Manapiece and just being like, Bob,
yeah,
come on.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then the other thing is like I would suggest to anyone listening to this to look at the printed lyrics of this thing. There's no throwaway lyrics on this one.
Hmm.
The rhymes are very smart. They're very intricate. I mean, they're not your Moon, June, B, C type of rhymes. I mean, if you go through, I
Can
mean,
you read the next one actually?
yeah, well, he can be fascinating. He can be dull. He can ride down Niagara Falls in the barrels of your skull. I can smell something cooking. I can tell there's going to be a feast. Sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace.
I
You
mean,
just
those are just you could make a meal out of that
you
stanza.
could. There's eight stanzas. That one right there. I mean, that one kind of brings you to mind to the Grand Coulee Dam to the Capitol rhyme and Idiot Wind in the acoustic
Mm,
version. I mean, it's so smart. Who else is making couplets and rhymes like this? There's eight stanzas in this song, and they're
hmm.
all pretty consistently intricate and good like that.
Hmm.
And it just
What
adds
does
that.
that mean, Matt? He can ride down Niagara Falls in the barrels of your skull.
I mean, just he gets into your head, and then he's just gonna take you down.
Like even
He can be
like the way your
fascinating. He's
mind
never
is can
dull.
be like Niagara Falls. He's in there riding a barrel in
Well, I
complete
mean,
control.
the image of going over Niagara Falls in a barrel means you're shit out of luck, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you're done for. And basically he's saying like he's fascinating, he's not dull. He's going to seep into your head. He's gonna live rent free in your mind, and it's gonna cause your downfall.
Hmm.
I mean, but he says it in such an elegant way. And if you listen to the way he delivers it, I mean, halfway through the song, like he starts leaning in to some of these lyrics. It's a very similar performance to the Foot of Pride version, the
Hmm.
fast one on the bootleg series. Feels a little slower, but by the end, like he's leaning into the lyrics and he's just
Yeah, he's
hey,
almost preaching like in like
yeah.
1979, you know.
I mean, he's all in, but just you ride down. I mean, he just is so bought into the lyric. The song picks up extra momentum.
Mm,
And it's one of those things where every time I listen to it, I feel like there's like a spot where it just kind of kicks into overdrive at the
hmm.
beginning. Yeah, I get the same like Hurricane, I feel the same way. Hurricane is actually the album versions comprised of two different versions pasted together. So the tempos are a little bit different. But if you go back and listen to Hurricane, it starts out at a certain tempo, and then there's a point in the middle where it just kicks it into overdrive and it
Hmm.
goes. This one's got that same kind of element, and Foot of Pride's
Mm.
got that too. It just picks up its own momentum, and
Do you
the band
think that's something
on.
that's happening in the studio in real time, or do you think that's like an intentional creative decision of Bob's?
I don't think it's intentional. I remember Lou Reed talking about Heroin when they recorded that, and that was an intentional change of tempo, to try to replicate the feeling of getting high and coming down and crashing. I don't think it's quite
Hmm.
there. I think it's because these are long lines, and when Bob encounters a long line, sometimes he'll speed through them, his unique phrasing. It's hard for these drummers to keep up and keep the beat with everything. There's a lot of takes that break down. And if you listen to it, like some of those fills that I love that Sly does, I think a lot of them are really attempts to kind of reset the cadence and the tempo,
Mm.
transitioning from verse to verse. Like Bob maybe gets a little ahead, he gets a little behind. It's probably Bob getting a little ahead. And then he's got to kind of fill it in and go back to the Outlaw tours. Jim
I knew you
Keltner
were
does
gonna
that a
bring that
lot
up.
too.
Yeah.
And that's what Jim Keltner does so well. Keltner doesn't practice, right? He just
Right.
does like however Bob goes, I'm going to get us back on track. We might be off for a bit during a verse, but I'm going to get the fill. I'm going to come around the turn
Yeah.
and we're going to start the next verse. And Sly does this as well. And by the end of the song, this thing's just cooking. And the performance is so great.
There were certainly moments in the Outlaw tour of both delightful sloppiness
Yeah.
and total musical fusion, like
Yes.
milliseconds later, and everything from a smile over to Keltner's way to the Bob dagger stare
Yep.
when
Yeah.
Bob is, shooting his heat vision at at
Yeah.
you.
Well, for the first time, he had to bring out the wrench to correct what
Yes.
the distance were.
Yes. Yeah. He's a great humanitarian. He's a great philanthropist. He knows just where to touch you, honey, and how you like to be kissed. He'll put both his arms around you. You can feel the tender touch of the beast. You know that sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. I like the rhyming of philanthropist and kissed. That just is so Bob
Yeah.
Dylan-y to me. Like I would never think of rhyming those two together, but for him
Yeah.
it's the second
This
language.
contains some of his best rhyming of any song. And again, they're very smart. They're not rhymes that you get from a James Taylor song or, Billy Joel or somebody else. And I like, Billy
Right.
Joel. I'm not a James Taylor fan, um, but
Oh,
you
some
don't
shit.
get.
James Taylor catching strays here on Songs of Experience.
Uh, but this stanza right here. So getting back to what I was saying before. So he's mixing political, social with personal. And again, this isn't just a political song that he's coming out with. This isn't just a love song that he's coming out with. He's putting all of it together. So the great humanitarian, a great philanthropist. Ronald Reagan was known as the great communicator. So, there's a similarity. It's
Mm,
that big figure. I think Herbert Hoover might have been referred to as the great humanitarian. Not a popular president because of the Great Depression and everything,
mhm,
but
mhm,
the great philanthropist. These are good things. A philanthropist is a
mhm,
good thing, right? But
mhm.
even philanthropists today, like, where are they getting their money?
Right,
Who
right.
are
Like
they funding? Nobody's safe.
I was watching the Grammys the other night. We're recording this on February 4th, and it was as usual like bad because it's an award show and it dragged on and
Hmm.
whatever. But I was on Taylor Watch, you know. So, but there, by the way, Bob Dylan had a moment at the Grammys. They did a tribute to "We Are the World."
Oh, they did. Oh,
They did a
nice. I
tribute
did.
to Quincy Jones,
Okay, okay.
and so Stevie Wonder and Herbie Hancock played We Are the World," and they showed images of the video,
Oh,
and
nice.
so there was this amazing moment where. Right when they showed the big group with Bob right in the middle
Yeah,
singing,
nice.
they cut to Taylor Swift in the crowd singing along. She knew
Oh,
all the
wow.
words to We Are the World, and I was just
Perfect.
like, Taylor Swift is
My
staring
worlds
at
are
Bob
colliding.
Dylan right now. It's my dream. But
Yeah.
anyway, my point is that I was watching the Grammys and it was mostly centered around raising money for the devastation of the fires in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
and good on them for making the show about that. So the host, Trevor Noah, every time he was on camera, that's what he went to. He's like, you don't forget to donate, blah, blah, blah. Fine. But there were these awkward moments where he was thanking the big corporate sponsors that were donating like, millions of dollars. Like, and we'd like to thank Amazon Music for their donation and Citibank and, like all these
Mhm.
massive corporations that are clearly contributing to climate change and which obviously is leading to these fires. And all these horrible things in the world with their problematic CEOs, taking buyouts and things like that. But here they are donating money as philanthropists. And I was like, it was just
Yeah.
like so weird to watch this like corporate machine thanking itself for thanking the corporate machine for donating to the problem that they're contributing to. So
Yeah. And
this line just hit me so hard today.
yeah, and he has always been skeptical of people in positions of power.
Oh yes.
Rightfully so. And look at let's just take a great philanthropist. Let's talk about Bill Gates. So
Okay.
Bill Gates has probably given more money away than anybody in history.
Hmm.
And I remember, and again, this is why this stuff is kind of relevant. Like when Microsoft came out and was popular, it displaced IBM, which was 1984 HAL from Space Odyssey.
I'm sorry, Matt, but I'm afraid I can't do that.
So IBM was evil, right? Because it was controlled. And Microsoft was this upstart they took, and they were popular. Well, then all of a sudden, Microsoft became evil because they had a monopoly, and Steve Jobs was the good guy. Well, then Bill Gates became he started wearing sweaters and he started donating, and then everybody loved him. And then he and Bill Clinton got along. And then COVID came, and then he started injecting micro trackers into everybody's vaccine, and now it's evil again. And so there's a
Which
skepticism
he
about
didn't do, by the way.
well, which he didn't do. Yeah. But I remember when email first came out, I used to get all these spam emails like everybody did that said, "Hi, Matt, this is Bill Gates. I'm testing out a new email tracker along with Disney. And if you participate, you can win a free trip to Disney. Please send me your checking account number, routing number, social security number so we can test this."
Oh
You
my
know,
God.
there are all kinds of stuff like this. So he's been accused of
Right,
all
right.
this conspiracy. But the point is that people who have power, resources are seen skeptically. And the inauguration was a great example. So let's take Mark Zuckerberg. Whether you like him, whether you don't like him, whether you like him now, you used to like him, whether you used to not like him or you like him now, he was vilified in 2020 because he was seen as pro-Biden against Trump. Now, flash forward to this inauguration, and he's up there when
In the
Trump's
front
getting
row.
sworn in.
Yeah.
And Mark Zuckerberg, obviously has a lot of money, he has a lot of influence, a lot of power. Both sides have taken a turn looking at him skeptically and suspiciously and wondering what he's doing. And Bob's always called this kind of stuff out.
Yeah.
And he's warning you that these great people that you see, celebrities, politicians, people in high places in the religious institutions or the civic institutions, the chief of police, the priest, like you need to keep your eyes open. And then he gets into it the very next line. He's already established like he's going to come after you when you're the
Hmm.
most vulnerable. And then he talks about how he's going to go after you. He knows just where to touch you, honey, and how you like to be kissed. He'll put both his arms around you, and you can feel the tender touch of the beast. What a silver-tongued devil this
He's
Bob
so
Dylan is.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
he goes from this right, like what you said, this like talking about the humanitarian, the philanthropist. He's like talking about he's calling out power, and then
Yeah.
he goes into sexy 80s Bob.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
it's like, and Bob knows how to do that, how to do
Oh,
all those things. He's
absolutely.
notorious for
Yes.
no, he's,
Yeah.
women have written songs about that.
Yes. I mean, for the female fans of Bob Dylan's and listeners to the song, I mean, they know guys that have tried to come across like that in every
Hmm.
bar or pickup joint or whatever. But just the way that he describes that, you can just picture somebody sidling up next to someone in a bar, and he's a ladies' man, he's a philanderer.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he's one of those guys where like the ladies are like, yeah, I know he's full of it, but he's really cute and he
Yes.
makes me spin, and I'm just gonna willfully suspend disbelief and go along with it for a while.
Yeah.
And that happens in real life.
Yeah, and it happened.
You
Yeah,
know.
I mean, Joan Baez and Bob Dylan, right? I mean,
Exactly, exactly. So, but just to encapsulate that all in one
yes,
stanza,
yes,
um,
incredible.
is incredible. Yeah,
Well,
not many others can do it.
the howling wolf will howl tonight. The king snake will crawl. Trees that should have stood for 1,000 years suddenly will fall. Want to get married? Do it now. Tomorrow, all activity will cease. You know that sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. This is where I think the song like is really hitting that fever pitch of what you're
Yes.
talking about the driving forward, the tempo, and those that might be the most vicious stanza in the whole song. I mean, it's just it's like a snake biting you.
I agree. This one's powerful. So and again, there's two parts of it, right? The first part, throwing out howling wolf, and then king snake will crawl. So unpacking all of it, right? So you've
Hmm.
got howling wolf, the great blues man, and you've got the wolf, right? The predator.
Hmm.
And then you've got king snake, obviously the big snake, king snake, but there's also a John Lee Hooker song, yeah, king snake will
Okay.
crawl, right? So you've got a couple bluesmen.
And that's like one of Bob's early, or like the person who first gave Bob some work, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
I think he
Yeah.
opened for John Lee Hooker,
Yeah. Yeah.
one of his first gigs. So you
Yeah.
so you've got like the classic Bob. I'm gonna tip the cap to those who came before.
Ah,
Um,
so good. I don't
and
think
then
of
the next,
80s Bob doing that, but of course he
yeah,
was. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then the next line, I love how it flows. I love how he structured it. Trees that stood for 1,000 years suddenly will fall. Just that image of like these giant sequoias, these redwoods tumbling. That it's
Yes.
starting to, the end of the world is starting to come. And there's all kinds of references to Bible verses and things like that throughout Infidels, Slow Train Coming, Saved, a lot of John Wesley Harding, all of his work. But this one I thought was interesting. So in Zechariah 11:2,
Mm,
the
okay.
specific verse that he's referencing here, and listen to how intelligent Bob is. So here's the verse. Howl, O ye oaks of Bashan, for the forest of the vintage is come down. So the Bible verse says howl, as in cry, protest, these trees of vintage oaks are come down. He sees that and he changes it into howling wolf will howl tonight.
Mm-hmm.
King
Mm-hmm.
Snake will call. He keeps the continuity, but brings in the references to the songs and the blues and his heroes before to make it something even richer and deeper than it appears on the surface, painting a picture of, this leading up to the world. And then, yeah, that's such a killer like that. Do you want to get married? Do it now. Tomorrow, all activities will cease. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
is just gut wrenching because who doesn't want to get married?
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
mean,
Right.
being in a happy marriage is, other than having happy, healthy children, is the most wonderful thing in the world. I mean, it's everything you could ever possibly want. And he's saying like, if you want that, you better hurry up. You better do it now
Mm-hmm.
because it's all wrapping up tomorrow. And just the starkness of it, like you said, like
Mm-hmm.
snake bite was a great way to describe that.
The final stanza, somewhere mama's weeping for her blue-eyed boy. She's holding them little white shoes and that little broken toy, and he's following a star, the same one them three men followed from the east. I hear that sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. Is Mama Zimmerman weeping for her blue-eyed boy long gone? I mean,
How I feel, I have no idea how I feel this one, how I interpret this, how I think
hmm.
of it every time
Hmm.
is it gives me those a hard rain's gonna fall feelings. At the beginning of his career, you know, he's setting out. That song is all about a young boy going out in the world, seeing all of these things for the first time, and going back to the parent, and they know what's out there. And they want to hear what they saw, what they heard, what they felt. Did you make it back? I
Mm,
saw a young child with wild wolves all around it. That's the same kind of world A Hard Rain's going to
mm,
describes from the perspective of a young person. Go, in some ways, I feel like we revisit that a little bit.
mm.
Somewhere Mama's weeping. I mean, her blue-eyed boy. I mean, there's a blue-eyed boy in A Hard Rain. Let's just say it's Bob.
Okay.
He's talking to his mom. I think why
He's
not?
like the second most famous blue-eyed, maybe the third
Behind
behind
Sinatra,
behind
yeah.
Sinatra and Superman. Like,
Yeah. I mean, and then that line, the second one, she's holding those little white shoes and that little broken toy.
hmm.
I mean, you're a parent. I'm a parent. For all the parents out there, you just know that's, that fear that you have as a parent that harm will come to your child. She's weeping and he's describing that in such a, sentimental way.
Mm,
It just comes off the page. And then
mm.
the last two, interested in your take on this, but following the star, the same one, the three men follow from the east, probably the wise men
Yes.
from the nativity story of Jesus's birth. So that's interesting here for different dimensions. Is she weeping because he's following his Christian faith away from his Jewish
Mm.
roots? Is she
You're gonna make
weeping?
me cry, Matt.
I
Oh
mean, and
my
there's
God.
and obviously I don't know, right, on
Yeah.
on Bob's personal level, but these are
Right.
some of the questions that I have
Hmm.
that you wonder if he's feeling as well. It could not have been easy for him to come out as a born again Christian,
Hmm.
um, having a loving Jewish family.
Hmm.
I'm sure there were all kinds of discussion. I'm sure there was mama weeping, all kinds of things going
Right.
on. And he's describing something that he legitimately felt what he felt in that 79. He wasn't faking it. I mean, he believed, he was earnest in his belief, and it came at a cost to him, personal relationships, professional acclaim, and I think he does a really good job in those interviews in the 80s reconciling his roots, his faith, his Jewish faith, and his beliefs in
Hmm.
Christianity,
Hmm.
as well as anybody could.
Hmm.
That's what comes out in that last stanza to me, that he's still following that same star,
Hmm.
because I think the story of Satan is probably a little bit more associated with Christianity
Oh yeah, it's
in
not
the
hell.
classic.
Yeah, hell isn't really a thing in
Yeah.
Judaism.
So that to me, I think he brings it back home very personally, ties it in. I think this is something still top of mind to him. I think it's
Hmm.
something he's still feeling. If you listen to the songs on the album, you listen to the interviews that he gives where he does open up. I mean, he says he's a very literal believer in the end of times,
Hmm.
book of Revelation, end of the world, and it's easy for people from time to time to say, well, this world's going to hell, hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
Everybody, as you age, you get through that where you
Hmm.
say, I don't recognize this world anymore, and it's not for the better, and,
Sound
and you
familiar?
also but you also realize that every new generation born thinks this is the greatest the world's ever been, and
Mm,
and they are right, and
mm,
and you are wrong as you age,
mm.
but it's just you can't leave behind the biases and the pre-recognition of reality that you developed in your youth as you age. It's just hard
Right.
to do.
Well, I mean, in this last stanza, he does. It's more subtle than he's done in the past, but he kind of switches perspective a little bit, like sort of in a tangled up in blue kind of way. Like he's talking about he's not there's not this overt warning of the kind of person that the man of peace is. It's a person who
Yeah.
does this and does that and looks like this and says this and tries that. It's now looking at Mama weeping, and then she even gets another line. She's looking at his things from his childhood and longingly, and then we go and we follow the blue-eyed boy following a star. It's almost like this has nothing to do with Man of Peace anymore. It's something else that he's grappling with, that he's talking about, because now that blue-eyed boy is following the three wise men. But then Bob, of course, brings it back. I hear that sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. He's not saying that this person in this last stanza is the man of peace, is the Satan. This might be something completely else, and he's just still thinking about it.
Yeah,
What do
and
you
I
think
think
about that, Matt?
Yeah, yeah, I think he's closing the chapter on this story, and
Hmm.
he's basically saying this is what's happening. There's nothing that you can do about it. You should pay
Hmm.
attention to it. But he's made it very clear in a lot of these other interviews at the times that there's another world to come. This world is ending. This
Hmm.
world, there's nothing you can do to save it, save yourself in this world. There are only actions you can take in the next world. And I think what he's saying here is like, hey, I've described the scenario to you. I've given you a picture of reality. What I'm doing is I'm following those three men from the east. I'm going in the direction of salvation. The only way out of this hell on earth, end of times in this world, by following the path that he described in his other albums,
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
his Born Again albums. That to me is how that comes across.
Mm.
And again, it's very heart-wrenching because, if you assume it is him personally talking about his mother and his roots and leaving his roots out of the feeling of necessity he feels
Hmm.
to achieve salvation. I mean, that's a very heartbreaking, heart-rendering final stanza because he's going in a direction and leaving his family in the world that he is describing as ending and with no future. And
Yeah.
it's bleak. And I mean, it's not a happy ending at all. And there aren't a lot of happy endings in Infidels. I mean,
No.
that Foot of Pride ends with the hot iron blow as you raise the shade and you go out into battle like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There's not a lot of everything's going to be okay at the end of Infidels.
Yeah, I mean, even in this last stanza, there's two things I was thinking about. One, just the image of the broken toy, like a little kid who
Mhm.
throws a tantrum and breaks his toys, or is completely irresponsible and lets their toys get broken all the time without a care about their possessions. I was thinking about the Taylor Swift song also, My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, that like this sort of like tantrumy version of the kid that I don't want to do that, kind
Yeah.
of thing. But the song could end on a hopeful note because you could say, well, maybe Mama is holding those things and thinking about those things, but he's following a star, and in whatever way he's being true to himself. And so maybe, if we're being literal
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
period of time, that's actually somewhat hopeful. And the three men, the three wise men, my understanding is that they were good, altruistic, like they're
Mhm.
they're they're good guys, right? So like even following them is a good thing, but he still stings you with that. There's this cynicism under all of that, that all of that is irrelevant because I hear that sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace, that any of those
Yeah.
people in that stanza could be the man of peace.
Yeah. I think that's one of the hallmarks of Bob's religious period is if you listen to a lot of gospel music, religious music, obviously with Christianity, there is the happy ending, right? You get eternal life. You never have to die and you
Uh-huh.
live in paradise in heaven. Like that's the ultimate happy ending. And a lot of gospel music is joyous. It's persevere. I know things are hard now. Things are going to get better. The last one now will later be first. The meek shall inherit the earth. It's
Right.
all a positive type of promotion. And one of the criticisms of Bob's religious music is there was no joy. It was like, hey, it's all like fire and brimstone, Bob. Where's like the awesome part of like getting through it?
Called
Um,
Solid Rock.
so and I
Yeah.
think that he's a little cantankerous and he's a little
He,
grumpy
yeah, he's
about
looking for
this
some.
period, and that's just how he was in these
He's also definitely
albums.
not sober in any way, shape, or form during that period of time.
Yeah, I think in the 80s there was a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think when I look back at this song is a piece of an album that tells a bigger story. And I felt the same way about Union Sundown when I talked to Rob, and that was a little bit more economical
Mm.
in focus.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But if you think of yourself as a person, as a worker, as a spouse, as a parent, as a son or a daughter in this period in your 40s, your spirituality, your economic position, the political climate, the status of your relationships up and down the tree, all weigh on you.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they're all good, all bad at times. I mean, not all. They fluctuate, right?
Hmm.
It's rare that you have everything just perfectly aligned. There's a lot that you're juggling with,
Hmm.
and he was the same. And I feel like he tried to represent that with Infidels.
Hmm.
And in this one, obviously, it's heavier on the spiritual aspect of it. But I like how he dips into the personal
Hmm.
relationships. He
Yeah.
dips into some of the political, some of the civic institutions, and shows you that, hey, it's all kind of connected. Like you can't just have a political existence that is irrelevant to the economics of the time, or that are
Right.
irrelevant to the state of nations, or irrelevant to the nature of man and woman at the time as defined. They're all interrelated and intercontextual, and that's what I feel like he was dealing with and grappling with in Infidels. And just anyone who's lived through their 40s can tell you, like, there's times when it's a mess. Like it's hard to
Mm.
figure out, well, what's up, what's down, what was who, and just trying to get by day to day.
Right.
And he's in that same boat, but then he's trying to create this musical album to define everything and ascribe the situation in the way that he does. And it's a big endeavor.
Hmm.
And I don't think in a fair assessment he pulls it off to the extent that he would have wanted to, but
Hmm. Hmm.
along the way, he gets so much further than anybody else has ever gotten, that I found it to be a personal resource and guide for me in that period of my life to listen to these songs and say, hey, Bob Dylan was dealing with these things too. And here was his view at the time. And a lot of it's been helpful to me.
Yeah, this is only 2 years after Shot of Love, which is, only in
Mhm.
retrospect considered the end of the trilogy of Christian albums. But it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be the end of that subject matter. And you can see sprinklings of this, what he was searching for in Shot of Love, and then getting to here. Like
Mhm.
there is a reaching for something in Shot of Love that he never quite
Right,
nails.
right.
And there's some production stuff there too, similar to this, that kind of got in the way. But as I talked with Adam Selzer when we did Lenny Bruce, but here, I think in terms of subject matter, he gets what he was looking for in Shot of Love, this reckoning with that whole period of time, and like you said, his what he was personally going through at age 40. But also he has to be Bob Dylan,
Right.
and the pressure of that is still there even after all
Mhm.
these years. I mean, to think it's only, gosh, less than 20 years after Newport 65, right? I mean, how is that possible?
Right.
That period of
Yeah.
time, that seems like so much longer.
Yeah, exactly. And Shaun of Love's a great example. And the best off of those sessions, of course, is another one that didn't make the album, which is Caribbean Wind.
Mm,
And very similar attempt there. Like, I mean, that's one of his great attempts
yep.
at a song was Caribbean Wind, and he never quite got it. And if
Right.
you listen to the different versions that you have available, you see that there's aspects and elements of it that he favors from version to version. Like
Hmm.
sometimes it's really the
Yeah.
religious
Yeah.
side of it.
Yeah.
Then there's other times where it gets a little bit more political. The man who invented iron, and he mentions
Yeah.
Vietnam, and other times it's a personal thing. The girl from Haiti,
Hmm.
and then it gets more religious. It's the Rose of Sharon from Paradise Lost
Hmm.
by John Milton. And John Milton, of course, the great character played by Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate,
Hmm.
where he's, I
The man
mean,
of peace.
the man of peace right there, right?
Yeah.
Beguiling, talk about, like, you look at Man of Peace, if you want to watch The Devil's Advocate, you can kind of see, like, that's kind of who he's talking about. Someone
Yeah.
who's irrepressible,
Yeah.
charming as hell, unstoppable, a force of nature, Al Pacino,
Oh, amazing.
in there. Yeah.
That's a great reference. I did not think we were going to come out of this in a Keanu Reeves Al Pacino reference, but amazing. I'm almost afraid to ask, as we've gone for almost 2 hours, but is there anything else you want to say about Man of Peace or Infidels?
Oh,
Have
well,
you said it all?
yeah, well, I
Do-
could go on. I could,
okay.
I have a lot of thoughts on License to Kill, the same thing. Maybe we'll
All right.
revisit that one again.
That would be nice if to have
But
you come back for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's all connected. But I would encourage anyone listening, look at the lyrics and just
Hmm.
appreciate the poetry on the page. Give Infidels another try, and just think about all the different things that are going on in this crazy world. And you will see some things that sound very familiar. You'll hear them, rather. They'll sound very familiar to you.
we've also got, some newer, not even people who are revisiting Infidels, but folks who have never heard Infidels. Give it a try for the first time.
Yeah, start with Joker Man, start with
Yeah,
Blind Willie McTell.
yeah.
You will be blown away with those
Yeah.
two.
All right, Matt, I don't do this all the time, but because you're a beloved patron and friend, I got an exit question for you.
Okay.
So it's either, as we're approaching the spring dates of the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour revisited and Outlaw tour revisited, those set lists pretty well.
Mhm.
So you have to chop one song from the set list, but you can pick either one, Outlaw or Rough and Rowdy, but you get to add one song that's not Joker Man from Infidels. What are you
I,
adding?
well, oh, I would add Foot of Pride to the Rough and Rowdy Ways.
Foot of Pride isn't on Infidels.
Oh, it's got to be on the official
Yes.
album. Okay. Okay. Well, let's see. Well, here exactly what I will do is I would go back to Rough and Rowdy Ways,
Yeah.
and I would add Man of Peace.
Oh,
And I would get rid of
Black Rider.
it's not Black Rider. It's
My own version of you.
no, it's the one that replaced early Roman kings. Oh, it's Cross the Rubicon. That's what I was
Oh,
thinking.
Cross the Rubicon. You
Yeah,
drop Cross the Rubicon
yeah,
and you'd add Man of Peace.
yeah.
I could,
Much more up tempo.
yeah, I could see
I
that.
think Cross the Rubicon tends to drag a little bit, especially when he slows it down a little bit. But
Well, Matt, if folks want to see you out on the Rough and Rowdy Ways or Outlaw tour, where can they find you on the internet to connect over Bob Dylan?
well, I'm on Blue Sky and I'm on
Yay.
X and on Facebook, where Bob Dylan fans congregate. So try to go where the fans are for any conversation. And I hope to see people out at the show. I think I'll hit some of the earlier shows in the spring.
Great.
Hoping to maybe catch the Omaha through the Wisconsin leg if I can, some of those shows, if I'm lucky enough to get tickets and can get away from work for a while. And yeah, if you recognize me or if you want to reach out online, just do, and we can talk about Infidels as much as you'd like.
Matt is a great pre and post and during show hang. So,
Yeah,
all right. Thank you so much, Matt. Take care.
absolutely, Henry. It's great to talk to you again.
Thank you so much for listening and watching. Look for the next episode on the 15th day of the month in all of your podcast feeds. You can give me a follow on Blue Sky at Henry Bernstein. If you're subscribing to Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to give us a rating and review. And for a video version of this podcast, please visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@songsofbobdylan. You can email us at songsofbobdylan@gmail.com. Thank you to my friend and mentor, Rob Kelly, for designing our fabulous logo, to my mandolin teacher, Mark Mitchell from the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago, for teaching me how to play the intro and the outro. Lastly, if you'd like to help support the cost of hosting my podcast, go to patreon.com/gonzo3249. For $5, I'll show my gratitude by giving you a shout out on the show of your choice. For $10, I'll also send you a surprise piece of vintage Bob Dylan merch. So big thank you to Rob Kelly, Roberta Rakove, Matt Simonsen, Christopher Vani, and Mark Godfrey over on Substack. Truly, I love you all. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.